I didn't see Mr. Drew at all that day. That made me feel a little bad, a little worried even that he hadn't really meant his job offer or that he'd forgot all about me already. When I made it back to the art department, though, it seemed like a giant spotlight was shining down on me. I was definitely not invisible anymore. When they say throw yourself into the work, they don't mean actually. Is this some conceptual art piece? You want to be a cartoon character when you grow up? I think there were other things the gang in the art department said, but I can't remember. I remember them laughing. I remember my face getting hot. And I remember just trying to get the little odd jobs everyone asked of me done as quickly as I could with as little conversation as possible until the end of the workday. The clock ticked on, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. I was more than ready to go. So much for day one of the dream job, but no one told me when the day was done and no one around me got up. All the heads stayed bent over their desks, their pencils furiously scratching at their papers. "It's okay, buddy, you can go," said Miss Lambert. I jumped a bit. She had kind of snuck up on me. "I can stay," I said. I didn't want to look lazy. I was a hard worker. "It's okay, everyone's pushing toward a deadline, and this is your first day. Besides, it looks like it wasn't exactly an easy one." She grinned at me. I didn't know what to say or do, and I kind of did just want to run away. The thought of going outside, covered in ink like this, really didn't make me feel great, but I did as she said and grabbed my jacket and made my way home. I stayed very focused on the sidewalk beneath my feet. Wasn't in the mood to catch folks staring at me. It was harder to ignore the shoutouts from the people in my neighborhood. "Hey buddy, you fall into a vat of chocolate there?" That kind of thing. I made it home and dashed up the stairs, knocking into Mr. McKenna coming out of the bathroom, that tired old towel wrapped around his waist, his belly bulging over it. "Watch it, kid." I burst into the apartment and flew past Ma, cleaning dishes in the kitchen, and into my room. I came to a short stop. I'd forgotten. My grandfather. He was standing in the small space between the foot of the bed and the wall, staring at the oversized painting hanging there. I suppose the painting itself wasn't oversized. It was the size it was. It just was really big compared to the wall, and it dominated the room, I'd always thought. "Just need to change my shirt," I announced, but he didn't move or even make any kind of sign he'd heard me. Not even a grunt. "Kozula," I said. My Polish was terrible. I only knew dribs and drabs. I wasn't even sure how I knew the Polish word for shirt in the first place. Telling him that didn't seem to do anything either. So I edged my way up to him, trying to get him to notice me. When he didn't, I finally just climbed over the bed in order to get at my dresser. I glanced up at the painting as I went by. It was a nature scene with a mountain and trees. It wasn't really painted realistically like a photograph, more like the artist had slapped paint on thickly and had accidentally come up with the picture. I was so used to it, so familiar with every shape and every line, but I was familiar with more than the picture itself. There was also the heavy gold frame. When I'd been little, I'd asked Ma if it was real gold. It wasn't, she said. I'd said if it was real gold, we could have sold it and gotten a new apartment, and also more food. She had smiled. "The frame isn't what's valuable." I didn't get what she meant then, but I did a few years later, when Tommy Sharp told me he'd seen in the paper that a painting that looked a lot like one of ours had sold for $10,000 at an auction. I didn't believe him and we'd gotten into a fight about it, but I'd gone home all bruised and looked at it. And it was like my whole world had come into focus then. I noticed the other paintings in the apartment, the ones stacked above each other against the length of the hall. I noticed how they took up space all the way to the ceiling, almost like they were being stored. They were all crooked, dusty. I'd lived with them for so long I hadn't noticed that the paintings were something to notice. "Ma, we could sell these paintings," I'd said. "We could have money. You could stop working yourself to death for Mr. Schwartz every day." "What ideas you have," she said with a laugh, getting up from the table and ruffling my hair like I was still a little kid and not 13. "Money's important, Ma," I said, turning in my seat to watch her. "Don't tell me money's important like this is not something I know." She leaned against the sink and looked at me. "We aren't selling the paintings." "They have value, you even told me that once," I said. "Did you see the paper?" "No." She turned back to the sink, but she didn't do anything. She just stood there, silently. Tears don't make noise. People think they do, because when people sob and stuff, they make sounds with their throat, but actually, you can cry and no one will know. But I knew. I always knew. What I didn't understand was why she was crying. My heart sank into my stomach. "Is it about Pa?" I asked quietly. We hadn't had a letter from him in weeks. She turned abruptly, her eyes wide and red. She seemed scared, but not in a way I can really explain. "I bet you could, Dot." Then suddenly her expression softened and she said, "Oh, your Pa, no, it's not about him." I looked at my grandfather as I made it to the dresser and opened my drawer. It suddenly clicked in, that memory. "Is it about Pa?" She'd thought I'd been asking about her Pa, not mine. She'd always been hiding something there, about her family. What was he seeing in the painting? Why did it matter? What was I missing? I pulled out my shirt and grabbed my other pair of trousers and slammed the drawer closed. It wasn't fair. I didn't need this. I didn't need some mysterious old man who didn't speak English in my room, in my space, making everything complicated. I didn't like how he made Ma sad, either. She was always so happy except when she talked about him. Why was she letting him into her life like this? Our life like this? Why was he standing way too close to that painting? It was all too much. Today had been just too much. I stomped my way across the bed again, which isn't exactly a thing you can do. It's more like you kind of trip angrily and fall off the other side. And I was back in our narrow hall. I stripped and changed my clothes and flung the inky ones onto the bed. My grandfather didn't flinch. He just stared. And kept staring.